Hello, everyone, and welcome to Creating Equity in Education in the Age of COVID, New Data on Early College Outcomes. This event is brought to you by the Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education and Mass Inc. It is truly a pleasure to join you all today to share powerful new early college outcomes data that exemplifies that early college can be a powerful antidote in closing the persistent achievement and college opportunity gaps that we continue to have in our state. A gap that, as we all know, disproportionately impacts students of color. We will also discuss what we must do to ensure that our policymakers and school districts are implementing adequate funding investments that continue to scale high quality, data-driven early college programs across our state. As you all know, we have a packed agenda today. However, before we jump into the presentations and panel discussion and guest speakers, I want to extend a huge thank you to MBAE, who has organized today's event and who I can say, without any hesitation, has been a remarkable partner to have in this work. And now, I'd like to start off our discussion today by framing our conversation around what higher education equity gaps look like in our state and discuss what early college is and what it seeks to accomplish. So if you bear with me, I will share my screen and we'll get started. I hope you can all see my screen. And look, we first know and start with the fact that education absolutely increases economic mobility. And there's no question about that. When you complete a 4-year degree, you can earn as much as your peers when you control for academic performance. However, we know that we aren't doing such a great job, especially for students of color in terms of their ability to earn a post-secondary degree. We currently have Black and Latino students who are earning post-secondary degrees at half the rate of white students, and the gap is only continuing to grow. So clearly there's a lot of work that needs to be done in our state, especially in light of the fact that we have a knowledge-based economy that we need to uphold. And when you look at this data set even closer, what you see is that Latino students, as a subset of the data, are completing high school and enrolling in college, but they're still not completing their college degrees. You see in this chart here, a 20 percentage point increase in high school completion. You also see a 20 percentage point increase in college enrollment, but in completion of 4 and 2-year degrees, you're only seeing single-digit gains. Clearly, we have an issue, and we need to ensure that we are utilizing the tools that can address it. And at Mass Inc., we've been extremely, extremely proud to be a part of the early college family. And we know that it is a wise investment in helping us address and close the achievement gaps that we continue to see persist in Massachusetts. But what is early college? It's a carefully sequenced, real college courses with strong career orientations taken during the high school day. It has strong enhanced academic and guidance supports. And one of the things that really I've been privileged to experience is talking to the various students across our state. And I can tell you time after time, they attest to how critical being able to have that guidance support has been. As a working class Latina immigrant who had parents who had limited English, I can tell you there are huge barriers in just thinking about, is college a possibility? Can I be there? And exposing students very early on while they're in high school, while also enhancing both the academic and guidance support that's needed in understanding how do you complete a FAFSA? What is an SAT and how do I prep for it is critically important. And so we've seen a lot of the students who have been able to enroll early on start seeing college as a possibility. And they're doing all of this at no cost to themselves or their families. And we know that, costs to college are a huge burden for working class families that are struggling to get by, paycheck to paycheck. So this is a clear program that really has many factors that help students and some of our most underserved students really see college as a possibility. And now when we look at what has early college delivered, we can look at national studies, and rigorous random assignment national studies show that it doubles post-secondary attainment. Leading states with leading high quality early college programs are seeing a 15-to-1 return on investment. And as someone who spent some time at the State House, I can tell you that when we invest public funding and public dollars, we want to make sure we're investing into tools and initiatives that really yield results and that really are a wise public investment. And from what we're seeing from national studies across the country, it is. And as of now, there is no other post-secondary initiative that comes close to yielding the results that we're seeing to date. And I'm really looking forward to Pierre's presentation that will dig deeper into what are the early classes of early college students in Massachusetts really yielding in terms of academic performance. And we look forward to continuing to track data to see what that means also in terms of entering the workforce. Now, in Massachusetts, we've been lucky. We have a plan to scale, and we've seen Massachusetts enrollment growing significantly. We have a plan to more than double our enrollment by fiscal year 2021. However, before we start patting ourselves in the back and congratulating ourselves in one, making this commitment, and two, moving forward to trying to accomplish it, we really need to also acknowledge the fact that when we decided to initiate early college in Massachusetts, we made a commitment of enrolling 16,000 students. 16,000. And at the pace we're currently going at now, it will take us till 2032 to actually get there. And in my opinion, that is way too long. So what can we do as a state to continue to grow and scale this program and track its data to ensure that we get there well before then? Because there are decades and decades of students who would merit and who would excel so greatly if they had access to early college. So as part of the discussion today, I think it's really important that we one, recognize that we live in a post-COVID reality. There are going to be huge financial implications to what we can do as a state, both for our state and our local school districts. However, we must, one, maintain the progress we've seen thus far with early college, but not just maintain that progress. We also need to now scale it and make it sustainable, ensure that there's public funding around it, and that there are secure, sustainable funding streams that will ensure that we're giving every student of color, every student who's economically disadvantaged, an opportunity to be exposed to the powerful antidote of what early college is in our state. And, you know, we need to create the infrastructure to ensure that it's there. And we all know it's not just about serving a certain amount of students. It's not just about the numbers. It's about the quality that it yields. And so the reason I've been involved in this work is because I want to see us make good on our promises to students of color. And in order to do that, we need to continue to track and share data. And most importantly, we need to hold ourselves accountable to that data, even when it makes us uncomfortable. That's why I am thrilled to introduce our next presenter, who shares my passion in using data to make informed decisions that speak to the best interest of our students. Pierre Louchene is a CDP fellow at Harvard and is also a policy analyst at DESE. And it's my pleasure to introduce him. He will share a little more detail and go in depth into what the data is telling us in Massachusetts about our early college cohorts who have gone through these last couple of sessions. So Pierre, without further ado, I yield the floor to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Juana said, my name is Pierre Louchene, and I'm a policy analyst at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and an SDP fellow at Harvard University. I am here today to present to you the results of a preliminary analysis of the early college program, a joint initiative between the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and the Department of Higher Education. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. So All 2019 calculations presented today are derived from official data collection systems, namely the Student Information Management System, the Student Course Schedule, MCAS, National Student Clearinghouse, and the US Department of Education's FAFSA reports. To gauge the effect size of program on student outcomes, I use propensity scores to create a one-to-one match of program participants and peers across the state with identical demographic information, including, but not limited to, race, gender, and socioeconomic status. So those are students with a similar likelihood of participating based on observable characteristics, but who did not. So just a little background, propensity score matching is commonly used in social science research when random assignment is not possible. And because comparison students don't appear to be systematically different from the participants before the program, outcome differences can be associated with the program. The balance table to the right of 12th grade participants from 2019 demonstrates the success of the match. So an equal number of students, similar percentages of different race groups, as well as similar baseline test scores in 10th grade. Throughout the presentation, I compare early college participants to schoolmates in their grade, to their school peers, and to the aforementioned match comparison group, the state peers. So these are three mutually exclusive groups, and there are going to be slides where I compare program participants to school peers, slides where I compare them to state peers, and slides where I compare them to both, depending on what's more appropriate. Despite my confidence in the methodology used for the analysis, the propensity score matching, there are limitations, hence why we are calling this preliminary. So firstly, there was only one complete year of data available at the time of the analysis. Secondly, the sample size is small. So there were only 1,140 students in the program across all grades and schools in 2019. And much of the analysis focuses on the 361 students who were in the 12th grade in the program that year. And we do so because they are the only students for whom we had certain measures of interest, such as college enrollment, for example. And then the last limitation is that many post-secondary variables, such as college persistence, college retention, and college completion, were not yet available at the time of the analysis. So let's start by looking at enrollment demographics for the program in 2019. Consistent with early college's guiding principle of equity and access, the majority of early college students in 2019 were students of color. More specifically, 78% of them were Black and or Latinx, our historically underrepresented racial ethnic groups in higher education. It should also be noted that the program was offered at schools that predominantly enrolled students of color that year. On to college credits earned while in high school. 85% of 12th grade early college participants completed one course, which I am approximating to be 3 credits with a C- or higher, while 47% of them completed 4 courses or earned 12 credits with a C- or higher. The C- mark is important because that renders the course transferable to an in-state public post-secondary institution. Not only are these completion rates exponentially higher than their school and state peers, but this was the first year of designation, which means that these 12th grade participants did not have the benefit of participating in the program for multiple years, 3 or 4, as it is designed. I should also note here that there was one school that was excluded from this calculation due to data reporting errors. In total, early college participants earned 5,088 college credits across the 4 grades in 2019. By taking and having the classes paid for in high school, as opposed to taking and paying for them on their own in college, I am estimating that students and their families saved approximately $1 million during the 2018-2019 academic year. our early college participants completed Mass Score and FAFSA at higher rates than their school and state peers. For those unfamiliar, Mass Score is a state-recommended program of study intended to align high school coursework with college and workforce expectations. Completing the FAFSA, or the free application for federal student aid, is an indicator of a student's intentions of pursuing post-secondary education. So that's a 22 percentage point difference for Mass Score completion and a 12 percentage point difference, positive difference, for FAFSA completion. As Juana was mentioning, previous analyses in the Commonwealth have suggested that aggregated results mask racial inequity in performance. Here, I disaggregate to show that the associated effects are similar or greater for Black and Latinx students. In addition to percentage, I am also showing the number of students here to be transparent with the small sample size. And this is for Mass Score. And when we look at FAFSA completion, the positive differences remain or become more pronounced for our Black and Latinx students. If nothing else, the most important takeaway from my presentation is that early college participants enrolled in college at a 20 percentage point higher rate than a comparison group of students with identical demographics and similar baseline test scores on average. It should be noted that 93% of the 76% who enrolled in college within 6 months of graduating high school stayed in state. So this means this program is not only closing opportunity and achievement gaps, but it's also safeguarding the Commonwealth from brain drain, if that was ever a concern. So we've already established that early college participants are majority students of color. So the previously mentioned positive difference can be interpreted as closing opportunity and achievement gaps. But I also disaggregate to bring home the point that these positive differences remain or become more pronounced when we look at Black and Latinx students. Like before, I'm including the number of students here, in addition to percentages, for sample size transparency. Two years in, the program is growing and in more ways than one. So the 2018 designees that offered the program in 2019 increased their enrollment despite having to replace graduating seniors. Additional schools were designated in 2019 to offer the program in 2020. So in total, the program size, at least in terms of enrollment of students, doubled from year 1 to year 2. In the context of current events, we also do have reasons to believe that students participating in the early college program will fare better than their school peers during the pandemic. As of May 1st, 2020, program participants completed their FAFSA at the same rate from the previous year, while their school peers dropped by 13 percentage points. Very, very reassuring. And lastly, looking forward for upcoming data highlights, survey results of self-reported data for 2020 look very, very promising. For example, schools are reporting 80% course completion rate in spring in 2020, which is very comparable to the 85% completion rate that we had in 2019. Furthermore, the schools are reporting increases in enrollment numbers for fall 2020, We have designated 6 new programs, which were approved by the ECJC in June. And then also our wall-to-wall early college high school is reporting that a number of their students will have earned associate's degrees by the time they graduate high school in a couple years' time. That just about covers my data presentation. But again, very early stages in our analysis of this program, but very, very promising. Given the match that was completed, despite the small sample size, no reason to believe that this program is not, helping the Commonwealth close our opportunity and achievement gap for our racial minority students.
Pierre, thank you so much for this presentation. It was great to hear you lay this case out. We really do appreciate it. And I want to let the audience know that you have graciously allowed us to share your email after the event. We'll be sending everyone who registered and attended a video recording of the event, the materials presented, and your email, Pierre. So if people do have follow-up questions around any of the data, you've invited them to be able to reach out to you, and you'd be happy to answer those. So thank you very much, and really appreciate your time today, Pierre. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. My name is Ed Lambert. I'm with the Mass Business Alliance for Education. I'm going to be moderating the rest of the program going forward. And as Juana did, I want to thank our partners, Mass Inc. They are great thought leaders in this space and in so many other important policy discussions. And it is a privilege for MBAE to partner with them in bringing you this event and promoting the expansion of early college in Massachusetts. And I want to thank both of our teams and so many others who have worked behind the scenes to get this done. As I just alluded to, we will be sending out the material after the event. I also want to let folks know that you should feel free to use the Q&A function, although panelists will not necessarily be focused on the Q&A, but we will try as best as possible, particularly during the panelist discussion coming up, to integrate your questions into several that can be put forward. So because of the volume of attendees, we apologize we can't allow for that direct connection, but a lot of these folks are familiar faces to you all as well. So relative to the data presentation that we just saw, this is certainly a level of transparency and accountability that you don't always see with new and emerging programs. And in combination with the career pathway thematic design of early college, this is an initiative that has truly gotten the attention of our state's business leaders and has gotten them very excited about the possibilities of improving college and career readiness for the state students. And as such, I think that the presence of our next two speakers is indicative of the value and the importance that the state and its leadership is rightfully placing on this initiative. So I'd like to welcome them to join the screen and the conversation, if that's possible. I also want to mention that this morning, representatives of the agencies that both Chris and Catherine are leading issued a joint press release talking about the data and putting this information out. And so it's very timely to have them with us here today. Chris Gabrielli is the chair of the Board of Higher Education here in Massachusetts. He was appointed to the board in 2015. He's no stranger to innovation. He's co-founded 3 nonprofits that devise, implement, and promote education innovation initiatives. He's been at the forefront of extended learning time for students and new governance models that accelerate student learning. And in his free time, he's a lecturer at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. So Chris, welcome. And Catherine Craven is the chair of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. She was appointed to that board in 2014. She serves as the Chief Administrative Officer at Babson College, has a wealth of experience in public policy and public service, having led the Mass School Building Assistance Bureau and the UMass Building Authority, amongst several other leadership positions that make her a very familiar face to all of us. So welcome both of you. And Catherine, I'm going to ask you if you would maybe start in terms of offering some reflections and thoughts about the data that Pierre presented to us.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to tell you how proud I am to be part of this group. I took over from one of the founding members, Paul Sagan, who was a former chair of the Board of Education, but also the work that Chris Gabrielli has done. It's really a collaborative effort between the two agencies and learning how to break down silos in government. This is a great case study for that, if anyone wants to do that. But again, at the Board of Education, we're obsessed about closing the achievement gap. We understand that this is, number one priority for the students in Massachusetts, is to see some way of closing the achievement gap. And when you look at sustainable programs that are proven and evidence-based to do that, this early college program has become one of the tools that we can use to close the achievement gap and give people access to higher education, which Pierre's data show and Juana's wonderful presentation as a lead-in show the absolute benefits of higher education. This is a creative, cutting-edge, collaborative, and evidence-based way of closing the achievement gap. And so again, really, when you focus your resources, as Juana was saying, as a legislator, and you would know too, Ed, when you focus your resources in the legislature on things that work and are proven and find ways to scale them, this is a pivotal moment in time during the pandemic, because if anything is persistent, anything that's persisted during this time of the pandemic, it's demonstrated by the data we just saw from Pierre. So it's pretty amazing when you think about that. In November of last year, the Early College Joint Committee, which Chris and I co-chair, voted to approve the following principles that you can see on the board here, but I don't have to read them all because you can read them. But I think some of the things that we're looking most proudly at is that this is based upon best practices. As you know, other states are doing this, and we tend to look a lot at what other states are doing well. By adopting the per pupil and performance-based approach, we can actually guarantee that these results are there. So again, data and evidence gathering in education is really important to see what's working and what isn't, and it separates the anecdote from fact, right? So we're really proud of the data that Pierre is showing, and looking at these gating factors here as ways of, garnering the trust to continue programs like this. Tricia, could I see the next slide too? So again, the funding, when it starts off as a pilot program, as a lot of you know in the legislature, these smaller projects tend to blossom if they show resilience and promise. And, we were on path for growth for this year before the pandemic hit. And districts were moving towards using their Student Opportunity Act money to support the program, as well as there was going to be a discussion about expanding the higher education portion of this as well. But, we basically went back and retrenched for this year during the times of COVID crisis, and basically said we're going to sustain the existing programs and take a look at when new funding comes available, how we can grow the program upon that threshold. So again, I know what Juana has pointed out, to get to 16,000 students is a really good goal. When in a state that has 950,000 roughly K through 12 students. So, this is a laudable goal. We have a long way to go, but the early data shows that there's something here that we should all be taking up notice with. And I love it, Ed, that you mentioned the business community is on board with this, because it really should be. I'd like to bring in Chris now for a couple of his comments.
Thanks, Catherine. It's been a pleasure to work closely with you and other members of each board, and of course the departments to carry on this work. I do think that's exciting. I want to talk about sort of three aspects of the moment. First off, it's kind of a signal moment for this early college effort in Massachusetts. The data earlier was so reinforcing of our belief that we could do here in Massachusetts what has already been modeled elsewhere, and to see 20 to 30 point gains for Black and Latinx students in the likelihood of attending college right after they graduate high school. Those are the kind of gap jumps that we just need to see in Massachusetts, and now we need to see at larger scale. I do want to emphasize how much this is a product of so many collaborators. First and foremost, the students. I'm glad Juana talked about that. These students fill your heart with inspiration for their willingness to go the extra mile to earn the college degrees and skills that they need. Obviously, the faculty at both high school and college level are forced to work closely together to align the syllabi and to get the work done. The fact that so many colleges and districts have stepped forward. We have 23 approved. There's a lot of demand, and that's been without the scale of financial support we'd like to see. So it really speaks to the organic quality of this. the state policymakers who've worked together on it. And this has also been a great civic sector contribution. I want to thank MBAE and Mass Inc., who have really stepped forward to carry this. And among others, the Smith Family Foundation has not only funded a lot of these programs, but for example, funded the position at DESE that's allowed us to have Pierre Lucian and semi-real-time data, the kind of evidence we want to gather for these things. So it's a signal moment that we're getting the results we kind of set out to get. It's a critical moment when you consider, we all understand how hard this moment is, that we would not have expected to be here 4 years ago when we launched on this. And I want to speak to how fortunately responsive early college is. First of all, as a pandemic response. The fact that FAFSA rates, asking for money that the federal government's willing to supply to students in need, stayed level among students, while unfortunately among their non-early college peers, it dropped a lot, really speaks to this is not something damaged. I mean, it's always challenging to carry forward, but in fact, I think it's sort of more pandemic resistance than many things. The fact that 80% or more of the students continued to earn their credits. I mean, we know how challenging it's been to sustain K-12, and these students with colleges sort of more experienced with online were largely able to go forward on it. And in fact, this is one of the few things that is somewhat plus for online because the colleges have the depth of experience in that, and the students are gaining skills they need. In the short and long term, the equity agenda that is so central to the Department of Higher Education, the Board of Higher Education, and all of us is served here. I mean, this data, today looks right at the students, mostly low income, highly students of color, and many cases first generation college goers, exactly the students we have not done well enough with in the past. And that if we want to offset the racial barriers we see in our country and the systemic racism that has held folks back, these are the kinds of approaches, not early college alone, but early college has a major role to play. So therefore, as we go into this fall and next year, it's kind of a defining moment. As you indicated, Catherine, and you said, Juana, we're at a moment of challenge on budgets, and we're going to have to decide which things can be sustained, which things can be expanded, and which things are less vital. I appreciate Chair Craven going through the slides. What we did collectively was take the generosity of both the EOE's line item and the Department of Higher Education's line item and repurpose them. We made choices. The higher ed money is now focused in that particular line item on early college in order to go where the evidence says and where the equity agenda leads us. So for this year, we think we've been able to sustain, at least on the initial budgets, what these students expect from us and what these programs have stepped up to. But this coming budget is going to be a crucial moment. There's far more demand. We have a long way to go in growth. It's a very cost efficient and actually delivering model. And, one of the reasons I think this is a really important moment to talk about this is I think it's important we make clear that this is the kind of thing we cannot put on the back burner. We cannot wait for a long time to go after. Lastly, I want to say one of the things I get excited about this is in the last 25 years, the goal in K-12 has largely been something called college and career readiness, the belief that we could measure whether students were ready to succeed in college or careers, as the outcome of desire. That remains crucial. But what early college speaks to is college and career success. Can these students actually succeed in college? Now, that is a worthier goal that anyone would have for their own children. It's not just you're supposedly ready, you're actually succeeding. To think about these thousands of students currently taking and passing and getting largely good grades, C- being the minimum for transfer, but largely better than that, getting good grades in community college and four-year university, public and one private college, getting those credits, moving towards those degrees that will be crucial to their success, really raises the stakes and the sights for what we want to get done in Massachusetts. And if there's a state in America that should raise its sights to live up to what we are about as a Commonwealth and what we are about as an economy and society, it's Massachusetts. So I really appreciate where we've gotten to. We're going to need everyone who's participating today and well beyond them to take it to the next level. And thanks for the chance to speak.
Chris, Catherine, thank you very much. Let me just have one question. We've gotten several questions in the chat, and Chris, you've gone more than halfway toward the nuts and bolts of how we scale up, what maybe some of the financial challenges are. Back in 2016, EY Parthenon did a report that mentioned not pertaining necessarily to Massachusetts, but how pertinent is it to consider that early college or post-secondary success programs are tough when you consider that education systems are built in silos, and that there isn't this natural tendency to move back and forth. I think that we're lucky in Massachusetts to have both you and Catherine, both of whom have experience in the other sectors, to get that. But Wanda made mention of that 16,000 goal, that goal of 16,000 students, so that we can meet some of the state's goals around access and affordability and degree completion. What are your thoughts in the short and the long term with regard to capacity, willingness? Are silos still a challenge for us? Maybe just quickly speak to each of those, and with an example if you'd like, and try to bring that issue home, because it is, people on the call are excited, right? So what are the next steps?
Catherine, I thought maybe I could talk about one broad point. And I know you've been involved in one particular community and sort of seeing how things come together. I don't know if that'd be a good point for you to talk to or anything else you want to. So I just want to not take all our shared time. I'll be very brief and say, look, the 16,000 goal came from a very simple idea, which was if we get the success rates that the national data shows we can get, Julie Edmonds and her colleagues in North Carolina have shown, by getting to 16,000 students, we would go 40% of the way to doubling the number of low-income students in the state who earn a college degree. So that's not 100%. There's a lot of other students, there's a lot of other ways, but 40% of that goal would be a pretty big contribution. And so we tried to size at that time, not like, wouldn't it be nice if it was somewhat big, but what would be big enough to not be, that would cost about $20 million a year at the kind of expense levels we are right now, not a number that is breathtaking by budgetary numbers. And it would make a major dent. Do I think it could serve a lot more students than that? Yes, but as Catherine pointed out, there are almost 1 million K-12 students, almost 300,000 high school students. So 16,000 is not an unreasonable thing. Obviously, we need the organic demand to continue to grow, but we see that in the communities. And I think the biggest rate limiter right now is the certainty of a sustained funding, which comes down to two things. Student Opportunity Act money. Most communities were willing to commit to using their Student Opportunity Act money for the high school costs, and continuing to expand a line item. Currently is the way we're funding it, and I'm sure Chair Roy will speak to his thoughts on this, but a line item called Concord and Dual Enrollment that has been supporting the per credit cost at the college level. We need those to sustain and grow so that campuses are willing to make commitments to students. Remember, these are multi-year commitments. If you enroll a student in 9th or 10th grade and make them a promise you're gonna help be there for them, you need to believe that the money will be there, not just this year, but over the years to come.
I couldn't have said it any better myself, Chris. I do think that the funding, Ed, is really a critical part of this, because I saw a question in the Q&A about the ability for potential cannibalization of existing funds. Having the state support these programs through those line items is really important, as well as someone else mentioned, philanthropy, which I think was a big driving factor when Commissioner Riley started the early college program in Lawrence. It's so worthwhile when you have a return on investment that's, evidence-based and data-based that you can talk about. So I think it's really important to keep this topic in front of the legislature as much as possible as part of solutions and toolkits to getting closer to closing the achievement gap.
Well, thank you both, and we appreciate that perspective. And it's very, very true that sometimes it's counterintuitive when times are most financially challenging to recognize that small investments that could scale up promising practices is the right time to do that. So we appreciate that perspective, and thank you both for your time here today. So thanks, and thanks for your leadership on these issues. It's now a pleasure for me to introduce a panel of practitioners in early college, all of whom touch upon the lives of students in some very important ways relative to delivering the early college initiative across the Commonwealth. And I'd like to ask our panelists to join if they could and unmute themselves and click on their videos, and here we go. And I think that we have almost everyone with us. So let me start with some round of introductions. First, Javier Cevallos, the president of Framingham State University, starting his 7th year there as the campus's leader. Mr. President, welcome and thank you.
Yeah.
Colleen Coffey is with us. Colleen is the Executive Director of the College Planning Collaborative. It's a regional collaborative in the Metro West part of the state that focuses on college access, equity, and early college, and is a partnership of Framingham State University and Mass Bay Community College. Colleen, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Odanis Hernandez is with us. She is the Chief Operating Officer of the Lawrence Public Schools and a parent of 3 lovely young daughters, and highlights that in her bio. So I wanted to take the time to point that out as well. Thank you for joining us, Odanis.
Thank you.
Lane Glenn, president of Northern Essex Community College, who began his leadership there in 2011, I believe, and has been very engaged across the state in a lot of these very important policy discussions. Mr. President, thanks for joining us today.
To be here, Ed. Thank you.
And last but not least, Mary Bork is with us. Mary is the Director of Government Affairs for the Mass Association of School Superintendents, and well known to many here as the former superintendent of the Chelsea Public Schools. Mary, thank you very much for being with us. President Cevallos, let me start with you if I could. Many people have expressed some very deep concern about how COVID-related school disruptions disproportionately impact students of color and have the potential to exacerbate significant equity gaps. How does early college fit into your campus's strategy of addressing that challenge?
Well, thank you. Thanks for the question, and thanks for having me on the panel. Closing achievement gaps is one of the strategic goals for Framingham State University. We are fully committed to the Board of Higher Education's equity agenda, and we have put in place a series of strategies to achieve this goal before COVID. Chief among them was the creation 7 years ago, together with Mass Bay Community College, or the College Planning Collaborative that you have mentioned, and that Colleen will talk a little bit more about it. Our idea was to reach to middle and high school students and families in economically disadvantaged areas, low-income students, and work with them to make college part of the future, to help them think about college as the future, to see themselves in college. In our region, many of those families are families of color, and in many cases, they are English language learners as well. And most of those students are first generation going to college. As Chair Gabriele mentioned, that is exactly the kind of student that we wanted to reach out to. COVID certainly has had a disproportionate impact on those families, and it has undoubtedly has affected the education of the children. So early college actually offers a very powerful tool to help get them back on track with their college dreams. Our plan is to continue to expand early college, and when we can safely bring people back to the campus, hold early college classes at the university. I think it's really important to bring the students to the campus so they can see themselves already in college. It is a really important step in breaking down barriers for them, making college part of their lives. And of course, as we all have been hearing about it, they will earn college degrees, college credits that will save them time and money. They will be getting ahead and getting ready to enroll, and we will work with them to make the dream of a college degree a reality for them and their family. So that's our hope and our plan for early college.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. Colleen, you can follow up on that, I'm sure. And you know, COVID has made it so difficult for so many students to stay engaged in their academic work. But early college students in Framingham and Milford seem to have weathered that storm pretty well. What do you attribute that success to, and what can others learn from that approach?
So thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about something that's so important. I really feel, and I know that the team I work with feels deeply, that early college is transforming the landscape of the communities that we're working in quickly, very quickly. So during COVID, it's an opportunity for so many to innovate. We were not exceptions. We actually created structures that improved the quality and I would say different access to how we are able to do the work. We attribute most of our success to 4 different pillars. The first one that I could share is around anticipated routine. So where there was a time that was so unknown, we didn't miss a week of meeting, and we had 96% attending the session the very week after schools were called out. So consistency and structure was super important to our success. it is now anticipated. So I can say that, for example, in our summer courses, there may be 62 people waiting in a room up to 15 minutes before a class starts, which would never happen in any spaces that I've worked before. So it's quite exciting. The second one is community connections. We run our program in a multiple tier, and there are a number of different people that could be considered caring adults. The first one that is really important is the professor. And through our research, we have understood that a connection from a student to a professor can actually not only mean college completion, but can mean higher level degree completion and career success. We found that to be absolutely true, the intimate relationships that our students are supported to have. So that doesn't mean that students just go into a room and have an incredible experience with a professor, but they're supported on multiple tiers. In every room, there is a coach that is there for the students, as the professor is there for both students and academic excellence. Our third tier is around academic excellence and support. That is also multiple tiered, but that one is really important because the expectations are maintained very high throughout. And instead of being an intimidation and let's see if we can weed a student out, there are many different levels and pockets where students can retain support, including a particular tutoring space and ambassadors within our own learning communities that continue to forge that community of success. And then lastly, because our community has come together, especially during COVID, as a cohesive community, it's become more intimate and folks are getting to know each other more. It's become safe space, brave space, and we really need to offer that social emotional support. So we have particular staff that are designated for social emotional support, and we plan to bring more staff on to be able to support all of the needs that are happening within that learning space.
Colleen, thank you very much. Thanks for that. Adonis, Lawrence was one of Massachusetts' early college pioneers. And in just a couple of short years, you've built a very robust, very strong program. Can you share some of the results of the work in Lawrence and give us your take on why early college has worked so well there?
Absolutely, and you're right. We were one of the lucky ones, and we're so proud for the work that we've been able to do over the years. I want to say that I can take the whole time left to talk about why our program is working so well, but I know we're limited in time. So I'll start by saying that our program is working for a number of reasons, for a lot of reasons actually. Very early on, the district made a commitment to invest on dedicated staff for the program. So I want to say that our staff are amazing. They're dedicated, committed, knowledgeable, and culturally sensitive, and that's important because of the work that needs to happen and to be able to reach our families and our students. Also, we are working well because of our partners. We have done a tremendous and intentional work to align curriculum and to recruit and support our English language learners, both with the goal to ensure that early college is an option for as many students as possible. We have a lot of else in our program. We are beginning to also service or work with special education students. And as you can imagine, that requires also a lot of support, not so much only on the high school level, but also on the college campus. And that's where our partnership have been very strong because they have allowed for that space, creating the necessary space to be able to provide that support that Colleen was speaking to. That has been important. We're working very close with our families. So another point of success for us is being able to be in the community, hosting orientation sessions, not only for our students who are joining the program or who are interested in learning about the program before they join, but also having one-on-one conversations with our families so they understand the commitment that their student is about to make. And, you know, that includes weekly calls, home visits during the summer, pre-COVID, and, you know, just being able to have the conversation and orient family as well, not just students. And I want to share, I'll end maybe by sharing a little bit more on the data that Pierre was referring to. I want to say that, 94% of our students who graduated high school in 2019 matriculated to post-secondary within 6 months of graduation. That's compared to 55% of their match peers. So that tells you that, early college works. It's an investment for the Commonwealth to continue to make. And I mean, Lawrence is a prime example of the program that works.
That's an awesome finish there, Odanis. Thank you so much. Thanks for that.
Absolutely.
Glenn, Northern Essex has been scaling early college. So we need to understand how you're doing that and how you're doing it successfully. You have designated programs in Lawrence and Haverhill. Why do you think it's important to scale early college in Massachusetts? And what have you found to be some of the critical conditions to allow for that?
We do. Thank you, Ed. We've been at this for a little over a decade, and in addition to Lawrence and Haverhill, have partnerships with a number of other high schools. I think if you take the themes you've been hearing for the past 45 minutes or so, two things are overwhelmingly clear when it comes to why we need to scale. Number one, as you heard Chris and Catherine and others say, this is a combination of a social justice and an economic issue for us. From a social justice perspective, there are a lot of underserved populations in our state that need this better access and this more affordable access. From an economic perspective, we have been concerned for years that we're not going to have the workforce that we need here in Massachusetts. And post-COVID, we're going to be right back to that concern again. The ROI on this has been proven in so many different ways. In addition to what Pierre shared, we know from earlier Mass Inc. research that students who go through these programs have a 15% greater likelihood of finishing a degree. That's huge. And that these kinds of programs return $15 for every dollar invested, right? Where else are you going to get that kind of return on this sort of an investment? So from our perspective, in terms of scaling up, a couple of the things that come to mind are pieces that Odanis just shared with us, 5 things that are vital, right? Number one, dedicated leadership at both ends of a partnership, the college end, the high school end, dedicated in multiple senses of that word. You need staff whose job responsibilities it is to do these things. It's not in addition to somebody else's work, then we lose focus, right? And you need people who understand how important this is and the mission here and are dedicated to the population being served. Relationships and a common vision for partnerships. One of our earliest early college partnerships in the town of Amesbury was about reducing developmental education needs. Our early college partnership with Lawrence is really driven toward college attainment, right? Lawrence, Springfield, Holyoke tend to have lower college attainment rates for adults. In Lawrence, it's around 11%. Before I'm finished with my work in my career, I really want to see that. Odanis is smiling. She's heard me say this so many times, 20, 30%. Let's get it up there to 40+% like the rest of the Commonwealth, right? Why shouldn't it be? So, what are the common visions for those partnerships? And are they communicated and well understood? A cohesive structure. The a la carte model doesn't work. And when you're scaling up, just throwing classes at students randomly is not going to cut it. We work on a pathways model with Lawrence and in Haverhill. And by the way, there are lots of other partnerships around the state that may not even be designated yet that are doing this very same thing, right? 5 or 6 different tracks toward degrees to ensure that transferability and that students have built-in goals. Odanis mentioned the importance of family, so I won't spend a lot more time on that, but number 4 out of my 5, certainly as we're scaling up, family matters in high school and in college, and that transition and helping to manage that transition is an all hands on deck effort. And the better those partners are at working with the families of our students, the more accomplished they will become. And then the last thing, and every speaker has said it, and we can say this for the rest of the day too, it's so important, is that financial resource piece of it. Those of us who have been at this for a while, and there are hundreds of people on this call, many practitioners who have been there, know that it's been a patchwork of the college contributing resources, the high school and district contributing resources, parents and families sometimes paying, local school nonprofits, foundations sometimes paying. For our part in Lawrence, we've created something called the Lawrence Promise, and we've raised $1 million to help scholarship students to get them all the way through an associate's degree. That's a few dozen students a year, right? If we're going to truly scale this up, We need the kind of predictable, sustainable commitment that Chris and Catherine described earlier from our state partners. We're willing to get out there and do the work, to raise money, to contribute from the colleges and the high schools. But the biggest piece of this is going to be required to come from the public and from state support. And when that happens, and we can convey that to families, we can really make this success last and grow.
Mr. President, thank you very much. And Mary, we are going to turn to you for the final word in this panel. These have been some pretty challenging times for educational institutions everywhere. And in the face of so many challenges and priorities, what advice would you give to districts and district leaders, superintendents, those with established early college programs and those who might be considering establishing them?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation to be a part of this panel today. And yes, these have been incredibly challenging times for education at all levels. But these are also times to be visionary, to invest in the future, and to make intentional choices to prioritize what works in school districts. We know the early college quantitative data, but sometimes we don't focus enough on the qualitative data from the early college program. I was the superintendent in Chelsea for 9 years, deputy superintendent for 7 years. And we, like Lawrence, were one of the early college districts. We saw immediately by the end of the first year, and then each year thereafter, students who had the early college experience were more confident. They began to believe in themselves. They were more willing to take academic risks. They were more willing to set life's goals and work toward them. The program grew exponentially. Early college is game-changing in one phrase. It is game-changing for students, for families. It gives hope to families, and it shows them that a college education for their children is achievable. Early college is inspirational and aspirational. Yes, these are incredibly challenging times, and we will get through them together, I'm certain. In the meantime, I would say to school districts, both with early college programs and those thinking of instituting, don't let the pandemic lead to complacency or fear. Rather, let the pandemic embolden us to invest in sustaining and growing what we know works. The pandemic should challenge us all to be visionary, to be future-facing, and to prioritize the paradigm shift for equity and hope that is really the true story of early college and its impact.
Mary, thank you so much. And I want to thank all our panelists. You did a terrific job actually anticipating questions and answering them as part of your presentation. And so we're going to move on from here. But I want to again thank you all very, very much for joining us and welcome our final speaker to the screen. I want to let folks know too, if you submitted a question that did not get an answer, we will get you an answer soon after the event ends. And we appreciate your patience with the fact that we wanted to ensure a lot of voices were heard today. It's now my great pleasure to introduce to you Representative Jeff Roy. The representative knows a little something about college and career readiness. He serves as the House Chair of the Massachusetts Legislature's Joint Committee on Higher Education. He's also the House Chair of the Manufacturing Caucus. He was first elected to the legislature in 2012 and has been representing the people of Franklin and Medway ever since. And if I'm correct, I know you're a history buff, Representative. Franklin was the birthplace of Horace Mann?
It certainly is. It's
There you
the
go.
birthplace of Horace Mann, and it's also the home to the first public library in America, which is home to the 116 volumes supplied by Benjamin Franklin. And those are the very books that Horace Mann used to educate himself. You open the door.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And please give us some final reflections if you would.
Sure. I want to begin by saying what a great panel you have assembled today, and I thoroughly enjoyed the data that we heard. I want to begin by noting that I believe, like everybody in this room, that education is the most important thing that we do as a government. And in the context of the community that I represent, and also being a first-generation college student myself, my mother went to school only up until age 15. I've seen personally the transformative power of education, and my higher education journey substantially changed the trajectory of my life. And I want to see that opportunity extended to everyone. And I see early college as a means of providing that pathway for success to so many. Georgetown Center on Education and the Workforce reports that 27 states in the District of Columbia will be at or above the 65% proportion of jobs nationally that will require post-secondary education beyond high school. And in Massachusetts, that figure is 72%. So as a matter of equity and economic strength, we have an obligation to prepare students to compete and survive in this environment. It's truly about expanding opportunity, rebuilding the middle class, and closing that equity gap. And that's what I envision as the true measure of economic growth and prosperity. And I know that's foundational for many of you with us here today. I also want to thank the folks at MBAE and Mass Inc. for spearheading this effort today and sharing this encouraging data. And it's encouraging to see the chairs of the boards of higher education and elementary and secondary education coming together for this work. It's so great to see the two boards aligned and collaborating on this important work. And I got to tell you, it's incredible to witness the rigorous evaluation, analysis, and data, which will help shape our early college opportunities going forward. I can say that we in the legislature are encouraged by what we see in the data, and we certainly want to build on it and provide robust programs throughout the Commonwealth. Now, I share my Franklin and Medway district with Senate President Karen Spilka, who's not only a partner in government, but she's a dear friend. And we both started our government service on school committees. And I can tell you that Speaker DeLeo is a true champion for education, and we've had many conversations on this topic. I know both the Speaker and the Senate President are committed to keeping our state at the top of the heap in education and equity. And I can assure you that early college will be one of my priorities in the next legislative session. You should also know that the Joint Committee did report out an early college bill in February of 2020, but as you know, COVID got in the way. But the bill is going to be something that we're going to build on in our proposal in the next session. And I can assure you there's a broad mix of support and interest in this topic. Massachusetts has a history of being innovative. And in the early college space, we need to look at early college efforts as a threefold. Number one, expanding degree attainment, particularly for those populations that are not doing nearly as well. And number two, addressing the student loan crisis by reducing the costs of higher education for families and students. And number three, helping students with their career development. Moving forward, we need to maintain our progress that we have shown in the past few years. This is critical. And at the same time, we have to develop a longer-term plan and grow the number of programs so that more students can be served and their communities can be served. And that's going to be the object of the legislation I'm pushing in the next session. We have 106 institutions of higher education spread throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. There's no reason why we can't offer and serve students in all 351 communities. That should be our goal, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you to get us there. Massachusetts has a well-earned reputation for being leaders in the education arena, but we have a little catching up to do on early college. We've looked at the other states and we've looked at their programs and opportunities, and we know we can do better. And we certainly have the brain power and personnel to do it well here and create incredible experiences for our residents. And together we can do that. So thank you, Ed, for the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Juana, for all your great work. And let me turn it back to you, Ed.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for those motivational remarks, and we appreciate your leadership in the legislature on this and so many other important issues. Let me just close by saying on behalf of Mass Business Alliance for Education, we thank you all very, very much for attending. We appreciate our partner, Mass Inc., and so many others in this space. And thank you all. And Juana, you get the last word.
Thank you, Representative Roy, for your advocacy, for being a partner. I know on behalf of MBE, MassInc, and some of our other partners who are behind this work that we really are grateful for all you have done. And we look forward to our continued work together to ensure that all students in our Commonwealth have access to something that really can yield economic mobility for themselves and their families. That is our time this afternoon. Many thanks.
Juana,
to all of-
I actually just got a note, wanted to remind folks that the
Yeah.
presentation and the press release are available on www.mass.edu. So
Yes, and today's presentation has been recorded and you can find it on our website. So thank you again to all of our presenters, to the Mass Business Alliance for Education for putting such a dynamic and thoughtful program together. We appreciate everyone who joined us today, and thank you for your thoughtful questions. And we look forward to working together with you all to continue to expand on early college and its success. Have a great afternoon and be well.
okay.